CARP wins big for you by eliminating mandatory retirement, enhancing CPP, restoring OAS eligibility to 65, winning a $3 billion commitment for home care, and gaining an extra $1,000 a year for low-income seniors. So champion what matters to you and become a member of CARP. Right, Peter?
I'm Peter Mahovlich, and I support CARP. So should you, because they've got your back.
Are you a member? Join today. carp.ca/join Team CARP.
From the ZoomerPlex in historic Liberty Village, the Zoomer with Marissa Semkiw.
There's the pass from Leno. Big stop. Here's a shot right in front. Let it score!
It's been over 4 decades since we gathered around our TV sets to watch two countries wage war on ice.
Here's a threatening move over on the far side.
Their way of life against ours. The staunch discipline of the Russian players versus the ferocious heart of Team Canada.
Here's the mix-up.
It wasn't just about hockey. East versus West, Cold War politics and spy tactics that could rival a James Bond movie.
You missed, Mr. Bond. Did I?
It was the series that united a nation and laid the foundation for generations of hockey greats to come.
There's the official face-off.
Right from the start, Game 1 in Montreal, the Russian team proved themselves to be formidable adversaries.
Center right in front, he scores! Cutting in around Ori, a shot, he scores! Karlamov!
Pummeling the Canadians on their home turf in a devastating 7-3 win.
And they aren't good enough tonight to beat the Soviets. It's as simple as that.
It was a wake-up call for the Canadian superstars. If they didn't learn how to pull together, they would fall together.
Takes his pass. He's knocked over by, there'll be a penalty there. And just one penalty after another in this game.
Failure was not an option for Team Canada.
And he is tempted to swing his stick at the referee on a couple of occasions.
And when the tides turned,
Canadians having a chance. Here's a shot. Right on. Quick check. They bang it in. Phil Esposito. Long pass to Phil Esposito going in. He shoots. Oh, right in front of the net. Esposito banged that. Here's another shot by Cournoyer. He scores! Canada have tied it up.
this group of elite players was unstoppable.
Here's a shot. Henderson made a wild stab for it and fell. Here's another shot. Right front. They scored! Henderson has scored for Canada. Henderson right in front of the net. And the fans of the team are going wild.
It's the stories that happen on and off the ice that turned these players into a unified force and forged a lifelong bond. And as for the rest of us, it made us all prouder to be Canadian.
Today, we welcome many of the Team Canada 72 players to the ZoomerPlex. The world was watching 45 years ago as these players defeated the Soviets in what was a glorious and defining moment in Canadian sports history. So let's get started. Gentlemen, thank you for being here. It's a true delight. Let me start. There was a lot of overconfidence going into the series. How overconfident were you? Why don't I start with you?
Me?
Yeah, you.
It was just Marissa, it was just the front row that was overconfident.
Actually, I think we believe the press too much, and we all know that the press could be misleading. And we saw them practice once, and I saw them practice once only, and I wasn't very impressed. Personally, I thought it was just going to be an exhibition series.
Right.
And I didn't train. I didn't do anything, actually. I remember saying the closest to the ice I came was the ice in my vodka.
Was there anyone who wasn't? Frank, were you?
Well, I think we did respect them. We were not ready.
No, we didn't.
We did respect them. It's like us, Montreal in '67. We did respect Toronto, and they win the Stanley Cup. But after that, and I think when we did respect them at first, I think they did the same thing at the end in Russia. They never thought we're going to win the last 3 games. But I prefer to be first at last and not be respected. But I think that's why they lost. They did exactly what we did at first.
What were your first impressions of the Russians?
For me, they were tiny.
Everybody's tiny to you.
They were tiny in certain respects. When we stepped on the ice with them,
And the face-off, and the game is underway with Petrov having cleared it into the Canadian zone.
they were stronger. They were more physically ready to play a series than we were.
Yeah.
That was the facts. Their training was for a series. We used to train for a 70-game series, a 70-game season or an 80-game season. And we went to training camp to get into shape. We never worked in the off season. We had other jobs. We did other things to supplement our income. And so we just weren't ready to play mentally or physically, and we had no idea. And the fact was, they were a team long before they got there. They were a team for 4 or 5 years through the Olympics and the World Championships. We were a group of players that prior to that hated each other, never talked to each other. You know, the Boston Bruins wouldn't talk to anybody from the New York Rangers. The Montreal Canadiens definitely wouldn't talk to anybody from Toronto, so on and so forth. I had trouble talking to my brother for a while until they traded for him in Montreal. And so anyways, but as the thing went on, all those barriers broke down and we became a team and a family.
And that Tony Esposito is being mobbed by his teammates. They all deserve tremendous credit on the performance they put on tonight. What a comeback.
Was there a sense when you were in this series that in winning this battle and winning this series, it would mean that capitalism would defeat communism?
Yeah, I definitely took it as a political war. In my own personal feeling, I can't help it. That's the way I felt. And you said something about being the best players from Canada at that time. We weren't. First place, they didn't allow the guys from the WHA to play, like Bobby Hull and Gordie Howe and Jerry Cheevers and Davy Keon and so on and so on. And not that that mattered or anything, because the guys that we had, the 34 or 35 guys we had, were great players. But for me, it was a political football, and I blame both countries. I blame Canada and I blame Russia. We were the political pawns.
All right, well, when we come back, Canada suffers a series of losses and is booed off the ice. Stay with us.
All of us guys are really disheartened and we're disillusioned and we're disappointed in some of the people. We cannot believe the bad press we've got, the booing we've gotten in our own buildings.
Welcome back. The Summit Series started out the way all Canadian fans had hoped. Canada led 2-0 in the first 6.5 minutes of Game 1. But the game took an unexpected turn and ended much differently than thought.
It's Santa right in front. They score! Oh, right in. They score! Very tricky player. He scores! Parliament let a bullet drive go. And it
What happened?
Right.
Just before the game, I told Frank in front of the hotel, I said, Frank, you know, I'm very nervous. I'm afraid. I don't know who we're going to play again. We never see them play. Yeah, we never know their strategy. We never know. We have no plan. And I said, Frank, I don't know. I'm afraid.
After the first period, the score was tied 2-2. And my defense partner, Gary Bergman, and I finished the shift at the end of the period. And we went in the dressing room. We're sitting there going, Bergie says, what do you think? I said, we're in trouble.
A lot of had to do with our scouting report, because when our scouts went over there, their key players that we thought was their key players, they put those sweaters on their B team. So when we came over, was a little we got a little screwed up a little bit, but the report wasn't the best. So I think preparation at the beginning hurt us a little bit.
Yeah.
And unlike today, we didn't have any video or technology like they have today. So I mean, the game is much simpler today.
When did you realize at first that you might be in for a bigger battle, that this wouldn't be a cakewalk?
Well, I think the game 2 was so important for us. After the first game, we said, wow, what's happened with us? But beating them the second game in Toronto, after that, we said, okay, now we can beat them. And I think if we were to lose that game, it would have been done.
Yeah. My brother was sensational in that first period.
Exactly.
Petrov on the far side, a shot, and it rolls right off to the side. A great save again.
He only stopped, there were 8 shots on him, but 5 of them were breakaways.
A shot, oh, a nice save. Another shot, and Esposito covered on that angle.
He was really, really good, and then we got going.
The Soviet, the goalkeeper's waving him. Yeah, here's Esposito. That's the score! Esposito!
In the second period, they end up scoring a power play goal to make it 2-1. The wall, I picked it up just outside our blue line. I had no intention of trying to beat anybody or anything, and I was just going to fake a shot, try to rag it, and wait for Phil to come up and start moving the puck around and kill some time off the clock. And as I faked the shot, the defenseman went up. I thought he was practicing for the Bolshoi Ballet. He got up on his tippy toes, and I went around him, and then I beat Tretiak. And so it was an important goal, made it 3-1, and then Frank scored the 4th goal to make it 4-1. We went on to win that game that way. At that juncture, we felt we could win.
We kept changing the lineup.
Yeah.
So we went to Winnipeg, they changed the lineup again. Yeah, 4 or 5 of us, I think, still played, but they changed the lineup again. Then we went to Vancouver, changed the lineup again, because Harry was trying to keep his promise, put everybody together. But I know that Frank went to him, and I know a couple other guys went to him and said, look, the only way to win this thing is to get a team together.
So as we continue through the series, you tied Game 3, you are in Vancouver, Game 4 happens, you lose. Phil delivers the most memorable speech in hockey history. We have that tape, so let's roll it.
All of us guys are really disheartened and we're disillusioned and we're disappointed in some of the people. We cannot believe the bad press we've got, the booing we've gotten in our own buildings. And if the Russians boo their players, if the Russians boo their players like some of the Canadian fans, I'm not saying all of them, some of them booed us, then I'll come back and I'll apologize to each one of the Canadians, but I don't think they will. I'm really disappointed. I am completely disappointed. I cannot believe it. Some of our guys are really down in the dumps. we know we're trying. What the hell? I mean, we're doing the best we can, and they got a good team, and let's face facts. But it doesn't mean that we're not giving it our 150%, because we certainly are. We love, I mean, every one of us guys, 35 guys that came out and played for Team Canada, we did it because we love our country, and not for any other reason, no other reason. They can throw the money for the pension fund out the window, they can throw anything they want out the window. We came because we love Canada. And even though we play in the United States and we earn money in the United States, Canada is still our home, and that's the only reason we come. And I don't think it's fair that we should be booed.
And as you could see by that, in those years, he used to dye his hair.
That's what I was going to say. Sure. It's got dark hair.
You remember that moment well. Did you all feel the same way at the end of that game?
You have to understand.
They didn't see it.
We never saw it. We went to Russia. We never knew what he said. You know, people tell us that it must have been great motivation for us. It was great motivation for the Canadian people. But as players, we never heard it. We never saw it.
I never saw it for 10 years.
We didn't even know anything about it.
We play stupid, we take too many penalties, and we deserve to lose. And we deserve to get booed a little bit. But not like what he did.
Well, I think...
the problem was that I had talked to my mom and dad that night before, and they told me that somebody had thrown a rock through the window with a note saying that Tony and I sucked and all this other stuff. And then there were these guys, these 4 kids in the 20s, above where the Zamboni entrance, yelling communism is better. And that just freaked me out, and I just went off. I had no idea what I was saying until I saw it 10 years ago.
When we come back, the epic struggle to regain control as the 72 Summit Series moves along. That's next.
Phil Esposito. Well, let's hope that's not the story of our trip to Moscow.
Team Canada played 2 exhibition games in Sweden, which were built into the schedule as a break in between travels from Canada to Russia. How important was it in changing the course of the series, if at all, or in preparing them for what was to come?
Well, and I've heard a number of these guys tell me how important it was to spend some time together away from the spotlight a little bit and out of the series, and to prepare for those final 4 games, and they really felt, and some of these guys I'm sure are going to add some color, but they came together as a team on and off the ice there. I'll give you some thought and some perspective that I have now. I was at the World Championships in Cologne in May. Russia was up 2-0 in the semifinal with 1 period to play. Canada comes back, wins 3-2, knocks Russia out of the World Championships, and with a huge comeback. I flipped a text of congratulations to Bob Nicholson. Great job by your guys. He sends back a text, thank you, John. You can't teach Canadian. And these guys, I think these guys set that bar of what it means to play like Canadians.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of happening. So, Game 5 in Russia, you're going into the 3rd. You're up 3-0. And Russia comes back and scores 5 goals.
Centered it, a long shot. There's a long shot. He scores! They find the score. It's a cover down. Wait, and it goes! It scores!
What was that like for you guys? I mean, what was going on in the locker room after?
Well, as we were going off, we had close to 3,000 Canadian fans in the building, and they were all singing the national anthem.
It was something.
So again, here we are 45 years later, and it still warms my heart to know that we weren't alone. And I think generally we were not, like everybody says, we were not a team in Vancouver or Toronto, Winnipeg, and Montreal compared to what happened in Moscow. That's where we became a team. And that's where, well, in essence, we became a country also. We had a lot of issues going on in this country at that time, as we know, with with Quebec wanting to separate, this, that, and everything. But all of a sudden, we started getting all these telegrams from across Canada wishing us luck.
And we hung them up in the rooms.
And we had all these walls covered, the whole dressing rooms, the halls, all thousands and thousands of names on these things from all across Canada, all being Canadians. Now we weren't alone. And that's...
I can't tell you how much that meant to see those
Unbelievable.
telegrams when you walked in the dressing room.
So then we come to
Over
game
the line.
6.
The shot hit the defenseman. Another chance for Gilbert. Shot wide on. Another one. The score!
You win game 6. That must have been great for morale. Was it at that moment that you thought, yeah, we're going to really pull this thing out?
Well, you cannot win the games ahead. You have to win game by game, and
Shift by shift.
Pete said, period by period, shift by shift.
What about you guys? What was going through your head as you entered into game 6?
I don't think a lot more than normal. You prepare. A lot of the outside distractions disappear. You focus on what you have to do. And the thing that I felt, we were starting to understand how they played. And they were very predictable in the way that they come at us.
How so?
And I think in the end, that got to them, because you get down to the last period, and they played not to lose. And our guys were playing to win. And it's a big part of today's game. You cannot do that. You shouldn't never let up. You got your foot on their throat, you got to go after them, and I don't think they did. They let up.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that in the 6th game, I think staying out of the box, because we were just taking so many bad penalties, you know, and kept them in the hockey game. But
And there's going to be a penalty, I believe, on this one. Here's a mix-up as the Soviet player shoved a bit. Now Bergman goes over to the Soviet player, threatens him a bit. That's Varlamov and Bergman.
once we made the adjustment, and the coaches did a great job, and once we made that adjustment, I think it was fantastic for us. You know, the whole atmosphere in our dressing room was terrific.
We had to make adjustment to the referees too. It was a big thing.
Oh yeah.
People have no idea how they affected a few of those games. The officiating, it was insane. That's all I can say. I mean, things were happening that we never saw happening before.
The one thing that struck me, and never seen this happen in our lifetimes, I was sitting there on the bench, and my brother was beside me tightening up his skates. And there was an argument over a goal, and I looked, and there was Al Eagleson being carried away by the Russian police.
Now we see a fight breaking along the board. Mixed up on the far side, the Canadian team are mixing it up with the spectators, and I believe Alan Eagleson is in on it over there as far as we can tell.
I says, boy, I says, they got Eagleson now, they're going to put him away. Yeah.
Should've keep him.
So Pete says, where? I says, over by the penalty box. He tightens his skate, picks up his gloves and his stick, runs across the ice, jumps over the glass in front of the soldiers. And you don't do that. No, you don't do that. They'll shoot you.
And the Canadian team are all over there. When that rumpus started, whatever it was, nobody knows.
Anyways, he raises his stick, and he orders the soldiers to let Eagleson go. Eagleson takes off and crosses the ice and fingers everybody, you know, and does the finger.
Apparently, the police were trying to throw Eagleson out, and that's when the reserves from the Canadian team came over there to help out.
And my brother comes back, but what made him do that? Is he a hero, or was he ignorant?
What made you do it? It was the team.
He was part of the team.
It was
He
a
was
team
part
thing.
of the team. He was an integral part at that time of representing the Players Association and the players. And, as we know, I made a big mistake, I guess. But at that time, he was part of our team, and he was not going to be allowed to leave the arena, because had he left the arena, at that time, He wouldn't have been coming home on the plane with us. There's no question in my mind. He would have been somewhere else.
Well, so actually, you know, I'd be remiss to not ask about, I'd read some things about how there were legitimate concerns among this group that while being in Russia, you might have been wiretapped, or there was some espionage going on. I mean, how true is this?
I'll tell you the
story. That's really good.
We were psyching each other up. We were wiretapped. We had bugs. We had this in our room. And it gets to you after a while. So one day I went back to my room to rest, and sitting on the dresser was this little round portable mirror, and it was sticking straight at me, and I went, So I took it and I put it under the bed. I come back the next day, guess what's sitting on the dresser? That little portable mirror, right at me. In between the sheets it goes. The next day, same thing, in the drawer. So finally my wife come back, being out on the tour, and I said, I think I found the bug. It's in that mirror. And I keep putting it places, and she said, you're the ass. Look around, there's only one mirror in here to put my makeup on and comb my hair.
After the break, we discuss one of the greatest goals in hockey history.
Here's another shot, right by the score! Henderson has scored for Canada! Henderson right in front of the net!
Welcome back. Back-to-back wins in Game 6 and 7 set the stage for Game 8. It was aired in the middle of the day in Canada. The country shut down to watch. On that day, hockey was all that mattered.
So they go into the final game all tied up.
Game 8 was for all the marbles. We knew it. They knew it. And as it progressed, it's probably the weirdest game and greatest game I've ever played in my life. You know, we get out of the first period 2-2. At the end of the second period, we're losing 5-3. We're in the dressing room. Let's tie it up and get out of Dodge. That's what we were telling each other. About 3 minutes before we go on the ice, they come down and tell us that the Russians said if the game ends up in the tie under international rules, they win the series. And we're like, where's that written? Then we said, you know, Phil stood up and we all said, we're going to win this game. We're going to win this game. Phil gets a goal in the start of the third period.
Centered in front. Here's the Esposito. He scores! Esposito! Esposito scored for Canada from Peter Mahovlich.
It's 5-4. We change ends.
Side, a long pass to Phil Esposito going in. He shoots! Oh, right in front of the net. Esposito banged that. Here's another shot by Cournoyer. He scores! Canada have tied it up.
We still got about 9 minutes to go when the Eagleson incident happened, and we're all over the board swinging our sticks at the Red Army. And now we've got to refocus. We got to, you know, we got a tie ball game, and we got 9 minutes to go, and we just went over and attacked the Red Army. Not a good thing, you know. And then we, you know, in the last 5 minutes, because it was 5-5, we weren't playing for the tie. You know, we had a full court press.
You mentioned earlier the refs were calling the game poorly, and of course, at one point in Game 8, Parise goes over and lifts his stick as if to hit a ref.
Maltsev takes his pass. He's knocked over by, there'll be a penalty there to Canada. Parise somewhat incensed at getting this penalty. He has no respect for the referee, and he could get himself right up the game. Parise is totally incensed at this call, and he is tempted to swing his stick at the referee on a couple of occasions, and I think he's going to talk himself right out of this game.
I mean, it's incredible.
If you notice that, the one referee standing right by does this. No penalty. Capella, who was way on the other side, called the penalty. And we had already had a guy in the box.
That was me, I understand. Don't be mad. Forgive me.
So then, of course, you go through the game, and in just a few moments left, Paul Henderson scores the winning goal.
Here's a shot. Henderson made a wild stab for it and fell. Here's another shot. Right in front of score! Henderson has scored for Canada. Henderson right in front of the net. And the fans of the team are going wild. Henderson.
Well, you think about Tretiak, he kicked that puck straight out. That was the weirdest thing. It's all he had to do is just smother it, and it was over. It wasn't a hard shot that I shot. I was going backwards and just flicked my wrist. But he kicked it straight out, right onto Paul's stick.
But you know what? After Paul scored, I was right behind him. I could have, if I have a camera, I would have the best shot in the world. But when he came in my arm, and the pressure we had, and I said, we did it, we did it, we did it, we did it.
Yeah. I said to Paul, it's the closest I've ever come to kissing another guy.
I was so short, he went over my head.
So in that moment, you knew you were heroes, is that right? Did
Not
you
at
think?
all.
You didn't know?
We said 34 seconds.
We were just hockey players playing a game.
And
You know,
and
that's
going,
what we thought we were.
And we were going to a party that the Russians invited us to. But when we got off the ice, the party was canceled. It was. The party was canceled.
Debate about whether or not Paul Henderson deserves to be inducted into the Hall of Fame because of that goal. Do you guys have any thoughts?
It's the greatest goal in the history of hockey in Canada.
My personal opinion is no.
You know, I think to be out the Hall of
Hall
Fame.
of Fame is a long stretch of period. Paul got his accolades no matter what. But to be in the Hall of Fame, it's a stretch of over time, over a course of time of playing a consistently good brand of the game. And as many times as I think Dave Anderchuk, for example, who scored over 625 goals, he's not in the Hall of Fame.
Played 22 years.
And he played 23 years.
And my brother had 4 Stanley Cups.
You know, so there's a lot of guys, and I mean, Paul did it. I don't think Henderson ever, I know he didn't play like that before. That's for sure. And he didn't play like that after. Almost like it was his, and I think he believes this, and I do too, it was his moment in time. And because he yelled at Peter to come off the ice for that last thing. And I said to him, why did you do that after everything was done? He said, I felt I could get it. You don't get that feeling very often. I mean, I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it.
Well, he scored the winning goal in game
4,
6.
5, and 6.
And game 7. Those winning
Or
goals
4,
also.
5, 6,
So
7, 8.
it was just, that's the way it was.
It was his.
He was amazing in that series.
He was.
That's right.
When we come back, the players discuss their lasting legacy. Stay with us.
And as we took off from Moscow, we all stood and sang, "O Canada."
By tens of thousands of people in Montreal and Toronto. Today, as evidenced by our huge turnout, they're still as popular as they were then. Did you know then that you would be heroes?
No way, man. I mean, we
don't
were getting
think
ready to
we're
go back
heroes.
to
We were
training
just
camp.
so excited.
They do.
We got to go and play now.
The next day we split up and went to training camp.
No, I think for me, the only reason after we finish all that, I realized that was my Olympic. We never had a chance to play on the Olympics because we were professional. And for me, I always play for the Montreal Canadiens, so I know the people who got a good crowd and they cheer for us. But when you went to Canada, it's everybody cheer for you. And now I know the difference between to play for our country and to play for the Montreal Canadiens. But I was fortunate enough to have both.
The team's doing a legacy tour. What's the legacy that will be left behind?
Well, I mean, it's obviously about teamwork, about success coming together. I know Pat's got a great commentary on what they did to come together from different teams and to find a way to work together to that common goal and succeed in doing it. And I'm very fortunate, obviously, to be here. My father passed, but these guys demonstrated that teamwork in cutting in a piece of the shares of this corporation, not only to give back to the Canadian people and memories, but also to provide whatever it may be left to some of the families.
I was very fortunate to be, the last few years with Bobby Clark, the coach in the World Championship and the Olympics. And the one thing that I saw that helped the Canadians was they had the ability, and it came from 72, 23 guys from different teams to put it all aside and become a team. The Russians fought, the Americans fought among themselves, but the Canadians came in and put everything aside and became a team.
And that's why they've won world championships now, because they become a team very quickly. The Russians have problems doing that now.
That's our legacy.
You changed hockey.
It's Canadians form a team. That's the legacy.
And so that's why you're doing this tour and you're sharing your story.
CBC did a movie a few years ago about Team Canada 72, and at the end of the movie, Phil and some of the other guys are laying on the ice, having a beer, looking up in the stands in the Russian building. That never happened. No. What did happen was the next morning when we flew to Prague, and we were on Aeroflot, which is a Russian airliner, and as we took off from Moscow, we all stood and sang, "O Canada."
It's been 45 years, and I see you're all getting emotional.
When somebody told me one time, when you win a Stanley Cup, you walk forever with those guys. Same guys. You walk forever. And when we won the Team Canada, I walked forever with these guys. I think playing against this guy, he would make me laugh on a face-off.
But I think the one ingredient, if you're looking for an ingredient, is sacrifice. We all sacrificed.
Also, when we, after we won the game, I was fortunate enough to we played a year before with Phil and that and Cash that to win the cup. But I've never, in that room, I never saw 20 guys cry in my life. And 20 guys had tears running down their cheeks for the emotion and for winning the way we did as a team. It was the first time in my life that I ever seen anything like that. It just told me, you know, how much compassion and how hard they work for the country. It was great.
When we come back, Zoomer Media and CARP President Moses Znaimer goes one-on-one with Phil Esposito.
Tell you the truth, Moses, if I could play tomorrow, I'd go out there right now.
Welcome back. 75-year-old Phil Esposito has always been known for saying what's on the very tip of his tongue. CARP President Moses Znaimer sat down for a one-on-one to learn more about this Hockey Hall of Fame inductee and his view on aging post-hockey. Let's take a look.
People remember you in your moment of glory. Mm-hmm. And what I'd like to talk about is the life that comes after the glory.
Sure.
I'd like to know what the rest of the trajectory feels like.
For me, I retired in '81. I didn't really know what I was going to do with the rest of my life, but I realized one thing. I wasn't suited to do much except for hockey. It was Christmas Eve, and it was 6:30 in the morning. I remember because I set my alarm for 7:30 to get up to go to practice. And I gave my wife one of these in the ribs, and she thought I wanted to fool around. She said, "Oh, Phil, come on now, not this morning." I said, "No, I've had it." She says, "What are you talking about?" I said, "I don't feel like playing anymore. It's not enjoyable. It's not enjoyable to go to practice I don't want to go to practice. I don't really want to play anymore.
Was that a psychological moment for you or a physical moment? Were there aches or pains that were telling you?
No, the aches and pains, you live with that and you do it. And
well, I'm sure people are always asking you, what's the secret to your long life? What's the secret to your good demeanor?
The biggest piece of advice I would give somebody, don't let the old man in. You know what I mean?
That's wise, yeah.
Because the more you think young, the younger you think, the better you are.
To see more of these one-on-one interviews with the Team Canada players, go to carp.ca. Well, I thought to sort of conclude our time here, you could each go through and tell us your favorite moment of the series. So why don't we start down here?
My favorite moment, we flew back to Toronto, and we're on a stage, and it's raining. And somebody yells, "Brad, your mother's here."
Wow.
I went and got her, brought her up on the stage.
I think my favorite moment was when my brother scored that famous goal in the second game. And you can replay that, and I never get bored watching that goal. It was fantastic.
I had a lot of great moments in that series, but when Paul scored the winning goal, I knew that for 34 seconds left, we would do anything and everything not to let them score. And I knew we won.
Oh, I got a lot too. But I think the pride of the guys, all together, every time we see each other, it's a reminder. And I think I was on the ice for the last goal.
Actually, for me, the fact that I got picked for the team right off the bat would surprise the heck out of me. But it was a reason I was picked was really important to me. Was his father, John Ferguson, and I were teammates in Montreal, won a Stanley Cup together in '71. And he was the reason that I was picked on the team. When he agreed to go, he wanted two players to be part of that team that weren't already picked, and that was Serge Savard and Peter Mahovlich.
The fact that Harry Sinden, Boston Bruin, reached out to my father, Montreal Canadian, and a real, obviously a respected rival, but let's face it, a hated rival. Really, to me, I think that demonstrated his leadership and what he was going to ask the rest of the team to do, to set aside their factions and come together. So he reached out to a Canadian to come and be a part of their management staff, coaching staff, and obviously that was, to me, a great lesson.
I'm like Peter. I think the biggest thing that thrill I ever had was like being picked for that team, and the other part is to be in that dressing room when we won, and to see the emotion of the guys just finally let go. That was the greatest thrill I ever had in my life.
Well, when we come back, Phil and I had to fly right out the next day because we had a game in Boston, so we really didn't know what went on. 23 years later, I went to my mom and dad's home, and the picture was still on the wall.
What I value most was that I played with a bunch of guys who really wanted to win at the end there, and then we did win. And that was the greatest feeling that I ever had in hockey.
I think, as all of your viewers and all of the fans in Canada, the players want you to recognize that the 28,800 seconds produced many, many emotions, many highs, many lows, but they did come together for Canada, as we are all Canadians, and we believe in Canada. The 28,800 represents every second of every game, and you can see the emotions and what they've done. I think that capsulizes the whole thing.
It was an absolute delight having you guys here today. Thank you so much for coming into our audience in studio and at home for joining us. We'll see you next time. For now, it's time to zoom out.